nerds, welcome back. I'm Tyler. Sorry about the hiatus, you guys. I've been gone for a little while. We moved last year, and this new place has nothing. I have no workbench, I don't have any storage. As you can see, I've got crap all over the floor, so I haven't really been doing a lot of projects. I also don't have very good lighting. What you're seeing is a temporary video light I have set up. So those are some of the things that we're going to be tackling in this video. The shelving system, a workbench, and then a lighting solution. But going forward, consider subscribing because this is going to be a complete in-home shop build from the ground up. So this is going to be one part, the other part's going to be an additional workbench and shelving system on the other side. And then going forward, we'll be doing a lot of home improvement stuff. This isn't a new house, but it's new to us, so there's plenty of things that we want to upgrade, so keep an eye out for those. Let me get this stuff out of here though, and we can start this build. All right, now that stuff's out of here, I wanted to talk a little bit about materials and some of the tools that I'm going to be using for this build. To start off, I have a little cheat sheet here. I bought 25 2x4s at 8 feet long. I'm going to have to cut some of them down a little bit because my garage isn't exactly 16 feet, so it won't accommodate two of those stacked next to each other. I also got four 23/32 4x8 plywood sheets. You can go with 3/4, ½ inch probably will still be okay, but I did the 23/32. Now I had these cut at Lowe's, and my cuts are as follow. All four of them, I had them cut to 30 inches. This is a 30-inch piece right here, and I'll explain why it's at 30 inches in a moment, and which left me with 4 at 18 inches. I had them cut 2 of those 18-inch sheets that were left over down to 12 inches to stack next to each other on the shelves to equal 30 inches. So the reason why these shelves are going to be 30 inches deep is I got these really nice totes or bins on Amazon, and this was actually the best deal I could find for the most heavy-duty totes, and it's just going to really help with organization and keeping all the dust and everything out of all of the stuff that I have in this garage. I'll show you some of those now. All right, you guys, here they are. Here's the totes I got. I'm really happy with these. They're a lot more heavy duty than the ones that I previously had, so I feel like these are gonna last a lot longer. I wanted to go over a couple of the features, why I chose these ones specifically. Number one, price. They were a lot cheaper than the other ones that I was able to find. They have locks. There's these little spots so you can put some locks on them, which is nice. They also have these dips for straps, so you can lock it up if you have tools in there, throw it in your car or your truck. If you're going to be driving around in the bed of your truck, you can put some tie downs or some straps right here and keep them nice and steady, which is cool. They also fit my plans, as you saw in the intro video. They fit my plans for these shelves perfectly, so I'm really happy about them. But that's pretty much it. Let's get to the build.
Starting off, I measure and cut all of the outer framing. This is going to be attaching to the studs on the walls as well as hanging out, suspended over the concrete. I use 3 different cutting techniques here to showcase how the right tool makes the job a little bit more efficient. Obviously, the miter saw is the easiest. Next step is I used a stud finder to find all the studs in the wall, and I marked them appropriately. I went through and marked the upper and lower sections of the studs, and then I went through with a level and drew some lines to marry the two together. This way, no matter where I'm at, I'll be able to find a stud. I cut 2 spacers I mounted to the wall for each section. This helped me hold the framing in place while I drilled and screwed them into the studs, making sure to check level each section. Every spot there was a stud, I anchored the outer framing pieces in using 4-inch screws. This will help a lot with the strength of the shelves. After each section was complete, I continued to use these support pieces through each section of the shelving. This one right here is for the bench. The bench doesn't have the support that the rest of the shelving system has, so I added 2 screws per stud to make sure it was as strong as possible. The baseboards plus these template boards on the first shelf equal 35 inches, which is about what my table saw is. The following shelves didn't have to be so high, so I altered the length of those template boards to be 21 inches. I added a screw to the wall to support the frame. That way I could check my level and then drill and screw this one support piece to the wall, instead of having it teeter back and forth. After that, I jumped on the miter saw. I cut 29 boards at 27 inches each. Afterwards, I moved these over to the Kreg Jig and I drilled my pocket holes. To make things as easy as possible, I only drilled these on one side, and you'll see why here in a second. I took those boards and I mounted them to the existing framing area. Everything was equal distant from each other, except for the bench spot. Where that bench is, I wanted to make sure it was able to withstand any additional abuse that I may put it through, so I added a few extra boards there. This was honestly the hardest part of the entire build, and as you can see, this is what I left it at after day one. Take note of the added support for the bench. On day 2, I used these clamps to screw in the outside support beams. No pocket holes needed on these ones. Make sure if you're doing this, use this technique, you guys. It was incredibly helpful. Honestly, I don't think I would have been able to do it without this. And here you can see me performing a gravity check. Seems to be working good. Carry on. None of these boards were perfect, and as you see here, this one's pretty warped. It only took an extra clamp to hold everything in place so I can drill and screw everything together. And as you can see here in a moment, I'll use some more clamps to accommodate the warped issue. I think I'm some kind of splinter magnet. I use the same process for each level of the shelving, just going through and making sure to accommodate any of those warped boards. On this one specifically, it was pretty nasty, and I had to push the board out of the way and then use the clamp to hold it in place while I was able to drill and screw it where I wanted it. Unless you're using perfect boards, it's pretty likely that you're going to have a gap like this in between two sections. All I needed was 2 clamps to shore up the edges, squeezed them all together, and then drilled some holes and added some screws. They held everything together really nice. As you can see here, I did this on multiple occasions. Don't forget in between to make sure that everything's level. Good job. I chose this specific method for building these shelves particularly because of the slope of the garage. I started off with level framing against the wall with the studs. Now that I'm adding these support pieces, I'm ensuring the outside piece of this framing is also level. I numbered each one of the supports and cut off the excess to ensure there wasn't a lot of overhang. I clamped them to their designated areas, leveled them, and then drilled and screwed them in place. 2 screws each should do it. I made sure to stagger them so that they didn't hit any of the previously installed screws. And as you can see here, it passes the sorry pull-up test. Pretty strong, didn't move at all. I measured and cut 2 additional support pieces just for the bench. Like I said, I'm not sure what kind of abuse this bench is going to go through, but I want to make sure it's supported. My build has 4 4-foot sections. Actually, 2 of those sections are a little bit shorter than 4 feet. My plan here was to lay both of these boards together after making my measurements and only make 1 cut. That actually worked out really well, so if you're looking for a shortcut, try this out. After the initial cut, I made a second measurement for the amount that I needed to trim off the second section, and did the same technique here and saved myself a little bit of time. It worked out pretty well. I tried to apply the same technique using one of the cutoffs for the 12 and 18 inch boards. However, when I got to the section after the first one, it presented a problem, so I had to disassemble and then continue where I had previously taken off. So maybe don't try this bonehead maneuver. Before adding the boards to their designated areas, I put a bunch of glue down. Now this probably isn't necessary, being that I'm going to be using a lot of nails, but just because I like to often overbuild things, I'm going to add it anyways here. After the glue, I clamped these boards down, being that they're a little bit warped, and then I nailed the crap out of them. I used the same process for all of the pieces of the top shelf. This one's a little bit unique as I'm using 2 halves to make a hole, the 12 inch and then the 18 inch to complete the 30 inch depth. The 4-foot sections below were a lot easier, but ultimately I used the exact same process. Next, I fitted one of the 2 bench tops down. I drilled the holes and screwed it in to hold its place as I added in the other 4-foot sections. This way, when I go to add the second piece, everything's kind of already where it should be. After I got that screwed down, I laid down the 4-foot section and then nailed the heck out of them. I removed the screws from the original top, laid down a thick layer of glue, and then added a second section to it. I then drilled and then re-screwed all of those screws. This is going to double the strength just for the top. Like I said, I really like to overbuild things, and I don't know what type of abuse I'm going to put this thing through, but I wanted my workbench to be one of the stronger sections. This plywood can be pretty nasty with splinters, so I grabbed my sander and I rounded all the edges on it. That way, I'm less likely to catch one. I went back to the hardware store and had them cut me another 30-inch section of plywood. I cut a couple slivers off for fitting, and then added one to this side and the other side of the workbench. This should separate my working area from all my storage to keep it sawdust free. As you can see here, I'm having a little bit of trouble. I was using some of those Phillip head screws, and honestly, I'm just not that good using them. I added 2 screws on each side for stability. Now, for this top shelf, it's probably strong enough. I honestly don't plan on putting a lot of weight up there, but as you can see, it wasn't perfect. It moved just a little bit there in the center. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a second beam, similar to how you would do in your house if you moved a supporting wall for the structure. I used those clamps in the same process I have been this entire time, held everything up there, drilled my pilot holes, and then screwed the screws in, just like normal. Adding that beam up there made a big difference. I'm actually really pulling on this, so you can tell it's barely moving. I feel pretty confident about it. The structure for the shelves at this point is complete. I wanted to move on to get some pegboard, so I went down to my local hardware store, I got some 1x3s and had them cut pegboard to the size that I was looking for. I made some measurements and used those cut 1x3s to start the frame. I used these quick little clamps and this right angle tool to hold everything in place while I drilled and screwed all of the framing together. Make sure when you're making the frame that it runs along those peg holes. This way you'll be able to easily see the frame through the holes, and then you can attach the pegboard to the frame after it's attached to the wall. It'll make things a lot easier that way. I used a block as a spacer to hold the frame up while I nailed it into the wood here. I then held the pegboard up to the frame and marked it so that I could see where I wanted to drill my first screw. The pencil didn't actually fit through the pegboard, so I had to go find a pen to make this happen. This was actually a lot tougher than it looks. I was holding the pegboard in place with one hand and then drilling and screwing with the other. It took a couple tries, but I was able to get it to fit pretty well. I did this for both sides of these dividers. I used the same process for the main pegboard in the back. Notice the gap that I left on the bottom. This way, if there's any sawdust or material left over from the build, I'm able to go in there with a vacuum cleaner and suck it up pretty well. But like I said, the same process, I just mock fit everything, jumped up in there, and then screwed it all down. A good work area needs good lighting. I got these nice lights off of Amazon. They're 2 feet long LEDs. They come with switches and these nice little connectors here, as well as the little mounting brackets. Let's go ahead and mount these. The brackets for mounting the lights were really easy. All I had to do was drill 2 holes and then screw them in. They're clip style brackets, so after you get the lights set up in there, you're able to actually pull and push them into the spot that you want so they're more centered. The connectors that came with these lights were just a little bit too short. So what I'm going to end up doing is cutting them in the center and then splicing them together using some wires that I had. This way I can make them as long as I want, and if I want to replace or move the lights, it'll be easy for me to do so later. To start off, I split those connectors right down the center and exposed the 2 different colors of wire. There's a black one and a white one. I used these nice little connectors after folding the wires in half and fitting them in there. Crimped them on one side. Added the color that I'm going to be marrying to the other wire. So for me it was white and red go together, and then black and black. Crimped those together, tested a little pull on them just to make sure that they were nice and tight. And then I used some electrical tape and taped each wire individually with the connector. And then I taped both of those wires together afterwards. I did the same thing for 3 sets of those connectors. Since I have 4 lights up there, I need 3 outside of the original power source. And as you can see, everything worked really good. However, a little bit ugly. I'll have to fix that with some staples. I bunched the wires up, hit them up out of sight, and then I grabbed my staple gun and then stapled them up there. After everything is said and done, it actually looked really nice. There was only a couple of small pieces of wire sticking out. No big deal.
All right, you guys, build's over. I hope you did as good as I did, or actually I hope you did better. As a matter of fact, I wanted to dedicate a little section of this video to my screw-ups. There's a couple things that I did that I'm not exactly proud of, but I wanted to make sure that you didn't make the same mistakes that I did. Number one, my plans originally for this guy was 16 feet. When I was measuring around all the junk that I had in here, I was off about 6 inches. I only had 15.5 feet. What I ended up doing was, over on this side, I shortened the 4-foot shelf section by that 6 inches, and I didn't account for some of the thinking that I did previously, and that caused me an issue where the totes weren't able to fit as well as they do on this side. So I had to take a little bit of material off the inside of the support beams so that the totes can slide in and out, and you're able to access them. So that's number one. If I was going to redo this, I would probably shorten 3 inches on each side, and I think that would have alleviated that issue. Okay, this is actually really embarrassing. The other thing that I screwed up on was on this side nearest the garage door, when I put the plywood up on the top, I was so excited about laying it down that I didn't do a second check to make sure the garage door would clear. Again, because I had all my plans were set for the 16 feet. I let a little bit hang over on this side, and when I went to open the garage door after setting the tops on, and boom, 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 I was freaked out. Everything ended up being fine. It was just a little bit outside of the appropriate tolerance. I ended up just using a reciprocating saw and cut a notch out. But just, you know, like they say, measure twice, cut once, and save yourself a garage door. So yeah, hopefully that saves you guys from any trouble, some of the trouble that I had with this build. I want to start a little section in my videos going forward, kind of like a tool VIP section, where I talk about some of the tools that help me out the most, maybe tools that I might recommend for people trying to build the same thing that I did. For this particular build, I chose 5. And starting off are these clamps, and I'm sure you guys saw me use these on like a lot of the framing stuff to hold the boards in place. They're one-handed operation, and sorry, they kind of sound like a turkey or something. These ones I've seen sometimes, so they make a little bit of noise. But I don't think I could have completed this build without these, honestly. They're fairly cheap. They work really well. Again, the one-handed operation. I highly, highly recommend these ones. So if you guys are in the market for some clamps, definitely check these out. The next one is this Kreg Jig. This is the K4 system. This is brand new to me. I hadn't used this one prior. I actually used its smaller brother a lot, and I wasn't really that big of a fan, to be honest, of the other one. I did some reading, and a lot of people recommended this, the K4 one. And honestly, I see the reason why now. This one saved me a lot of time. I think I drilled like 29 boards or something with this. It only took me like 15 minutes too. You just pop it open, drop the board in, clamp it, and then drill, and then you're on to the next one. It was really, really fast. So if you're looking for a pocket hole system, this one I highly recommend as well. Like really a breeze to use in comparison to some of the other ones. So maybe check that one out. And it's really just a little bit more expensive than its little brother. So if you're gonna buy one, probably go with this one right off the bat. Number 3, believe it or not, are screws. Now I typically use just Phillips head screws, but I will not any longer. I'm not going back. These ones have 3 features specifically that I really like. that helped me a lot. Number one, it's the star pattern head rather than just like the Phillips. I didn't strip a single screw. You probably see me throw a fit a little bit in a couple of these. I did use some Phillips screws, especially for like these pieces here to put the pegboard on. I didn't strip a single screw. The drill stayed connected the entire time. These were awesome. The second feature that I really like is they countersink. So they have these little fins underneath the head, and while you're screwing them in, they remove material, and so they'll sit nice and flush on any material that you're screwing them into. So that was really cool. The last piece, these are supposed to be no split. So I've never used a screw that advertised no split before, and to be honest, I still drilled all my pilot holes for these just out of habit. But I would like to try do a little bit more research and see if that's the case with these. But yeah, if you guys are looking for screws, again, these aren't much more expensive than the regular thing. I will not be going back. I'll always be using something like this. So I'll try and link a lot of this stuff below. The fourth piece is my Ryobi nail gun. You guys have seen me use this on other builds before. Again, this one's a huge time savings. It's a little bit more expensive than the other gear here, but if you're looking for a nail gun, I highly recommend this one. And I'm really, really glad that I bought this. It saves me a ton of time rather than going through and, you know, hammering each nail individually. I use this one on the tops up here. So keep an eye out for it. Again, it was just super fast. The last piece, and actually the cheapest piece of gear that I have here, is this speed square. If you do not have a speed square, just get one. It's super cheap and it saves you so much time. If you're like let's say that you have a board like this wide, you have to measure one side, you have to mark it, you have to measure the other side, you have to mark it. This is so much faster. You mark one side, put it up against the board, and you know that line's straight. I use it a lot, especially if I'm doing like circular saw cuts or like a jigsaw or something. I need to keep the line straight. This is gonna help you with that guide. But that's it, you guys. I just wanted to go over a couple of those. Hopefully that helps you out. If you're still watching this video, thank you so much. I hope your build turned out as good or better than mine did. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If any of this stuff helped you out, please like and also subscribe. It would really help me. I appreciate that. And actually even share if you know some other wood nerds that might want to build a bench or some shelves like this. But I just wanted to thank you guys for hanging out and building with me today, and I'll see you next time.